When a woman walked into the American consulate in Mexico with 8 children in tow, they had no idea they were looking at a missing woman who had been kidnapped 19 years prior. This woman was not even a preteen when she vanished from the States, and now she begged for a return and an escape from her captor. You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I am Brooke Makenna, and here we focus on the victims over the killers every single time. If you would like to subscribe and join our community, I would love that. Give us a thumbs up and leave a nice comment down below. But this story is absolutely incredible about a kidnapped child found alive 19 years later with 9 children of her own. In today's video, we're going to talk a bit about CPTSD and how it connects to this survivor, as well as my own struggles with it. And so I know personally just how important therapy is to live a life where you're not just surviving, you are actually thriving, and it is possible for everyone. So that brings me to today's sponsor, Rula. Rula is a healthcare company connecting you with quality therapists and mental health experts who will specialize in you. Affordable and in-network mental health care, as well as medication management, should be in reach for everyone, and Rula makes sure that insurance is actually helping you take care of your mental health, just as it helps to take care of your physical health. Rula partners with more than 100 insurance plans and brings down the average cost to $15 per session. And it's all benefits that you already have with the insurance you're paying for. I love that on the Rula website, you can state your goals, your background, your preferences, and get a curated list of therapists that actually fit what you need and will help you. There are no more wait lists. You can get an appointment as soon as tomorrow. And Rula actually stays with you throughout your care, so you never feel like you're doing it alone. So this year, make changes that you're actually going to stick with, and go to rula.com/McKenna to get started. That's RULA.com/McKenna, and it is a mental health care that is actually built to last. Now let's get back to the story. A few weeks back, I did the story covering a victim named Kay who had lived her entire life trapped in a prison-like cell room, and she was basically treated like a slave. Now, a lot of you guys told me when I covered that case that there was a very similar one in Poland. This was the case of Mirella, who had spent 27 years in her family's apartment building before being found just days from her death. So I was looking into this, of course, and that is what led me to the story that we're covering today. A story that, like I said, is not covered greatly in the true crime space. And I believe, just like every survivor, her story deserves to be told. So let's get into the case of Rosalynn McGinnis. Back in 1997, Rosalynn McGinnis was a 12-year-old living with her mother, stepfather, and brothers in Oklahoma. She was an honor student who took violin lessons, and she wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. She had lots of family in Kansas City, Missouri, and had lived there prior and was constantly visiting them, but they had all moved to Oklahoma. So at this point, she was in middle school in 6th grade, and on January 31st of 1997, she never returned home. Now, she had been born in 1984 to Gayla and Michael and had several siblings, but around 9 years old, her mother Gayla had actually met a man named Henri at a park, and he soon became their stepfather. 3 years later, Rosalynn would vanish. For the next decade, no one knew where she had gone, and letters would be received allegedly from Rosalynn, sent to relatives, the media, law enforcement, stating that she had run away from her crazy mother and no good family. While her mother searched for her, the search was fruitless. But 19 years later, that's right, almost 2 decades, a woman showed up at the U.S. consulate in Mexico. She had 8 kids following behind her. It was July 2016, and the woman told the guards on duty that she was an American citizen, and she had been kidnapped many years ago. The woman and the children were processed through security and taken into a quiet room to be questioned. Diplomatic Security Service investigator Clifton Funkhauser entered the room to speak with her, and the woman told Funkhauser that she wanted to return to the United States and take her 8 children with her. She explained that when she was about 10 years old, she had been kidnapped, held captive, tortured, lived in horrible conditions, and abused. She was forced to have all of these children with her captor. She also knew that her captor had been involved in human smuggling activities at the U.S.-Mexico border. Her name? Rosalynn McGinnis, a name that she hadn't been able to use in years. After hearing her story, the DSS Special Agent Funkhauser contacted the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children to report this woman found and help her get the proper paperwork to get home. They also referred the case to the FBI, who she would tell her story to next. After nearly 2 decades, Rosalynn had been found alive and returned to the United States. Now, her 8 children were able to go with her, settling in Kansas City, Missouri, near Rosalynn's hometown of Springfield. But it was revealed that Rosalynn actually had a 9th child as well who had escaped the captor prior. Rosalynn continued to work with the DSS to bring her captor to justice, because he too had been missing for the last 19 years. By September 2017, a year after Rosalynn's escape, the DSS confirmed that her captor had been located in Mexico. This was the first time any U.S. authority had located him since 1997. The FBI and the Mexican authorities began working together to obtain the paperwork needed to remove him from Mexico and return him to the States. Throughout the investigation, dozens of copies of IDs were found to be used by this man. Rosalynn claimed that they had gone by different aliases throughout all of the years, and she didn't know which one that he was currently using. But the investigative team ended up tracking him to Oaxaca, Mexico, where he was finally arrested. His name? Henri Piette. And Henri is a name you've heard before, because that was Rosalynn's stepfather. Rosalynn's horror story had started long before her kidnapping. You see, when her mother Gayla met Henri, she was still with Rosalynn's father. The two began to have playdates with their kids, as Henri had children as well. The kids became close, they were having sleepovers, and at first she thought that it was a bad dream when she was essayed by Henri at one of the sleepovers. She didn't tell her mom at the time because she had confessed to her mother prior that one of her half-brothers had essayed her previously, and her mom didn't believe her. So Rosalynn kept this a secret. And Gayla and Henri began getting to know each other better. They had similar religious beliefs, as they were both Mormons, and they began to hang out more and more. And that is when her husband Michael would end up leaving her. Henri stepped in as a father to Rosalynn and her brothers soon after. Rosalynn stated that Henri was always reading these Bible passages and encouraging their mother to discipline them physically. He then began beating the children and their mother. And Rosalynn described how Henri would be separating the children often and imposing some sort of hierarchy system within the family. But while in Springfield, Missouri, the authorities were aware of Gayla's beatings and they were trying to help her. So Henri began to tell her that she would be blamed for it if she ever told them the truth. Henri then moved the entire family, on a road trip. He wanted to move them out of the place where people were catching on to his abusive behavior. They went through Arizona, Oregon, Utah, California, Montana, Texas, Oklahoma, and even Guatemala. The family was begging for money. They lived in a tent for quite some time. Rosalynn remembered being given beer by Henri before he would essay her, and the family eventually settled in Wagner, Oklahoma. However, Henri was said to become even more of a monster stepfather there. The physical and sexual became psychological as well. He would hit the kids with 2x4s if they didn't have proper grammar. He would punch their mother directly in the face. And the essay of Rosalynn continued even 2 years later. This is when her mother would find the strength to escape with the children. She took them all back to Independence, Missouri, where her mother lived. and they were free, or so they thought. Only weeks later, Henri would arrive in Missouri and take them back to Oklahoma. Henri would force Gayla to marry him at this time. But little did anyone know that he also pretended to marry her 11-year-old daughter, Rosalynn. Rosalynn would explain that Henri told her that he had sinned by having sex with her, and to address this, he was going to have to marry her. They had a secret ceremony that was officiated by one of Henri's sons, but the essay continued daily at this time. At 12 years old, CPS would actually get involved with his family, and Gayla and the kids were sent to live in a DV shelter in Oklahoma. Rosalynn was finally able to be a kid again. She was finally attending middle school. She was away from her abusive stepfather, but he refused to let them go. Not long after, Rosalynn remembered that she was outside at school on the playground at recess, and she saw Henri outside. This was Pansy Kid Middle School on January 31st when Henri approached the 12-year-old girl and told her that he loved her and would reunite their family. He told her to look for signs. Later in the school day, Rosalynn would see a sombrero and a poncho sitting inside of the school. She knew that these were from a trip to Mexico that she had taken with Henri. She was then called to the school office and told that someone was there to pick her up. She ran outside. She saw Henri's son Tobias in the truck. She got inside and drove to Tulsa, Oklahoma with him, believing that her entire family was coming as well. She was reunited with Henri and his children. However, her mother and her siblings weren't there. When asked about them, Henri told her that they had not had enough time to get her brothers and that her mother was not coming back. As if that wasn't the most horrifying thing that her stepfather could have said to her, he continued talking to his own children when he told them that Rosalynn was their new mother. Meanwhile, her mother, who was thankfully alive and well, had no idea where her daughter had gone. She was told by the school that her daughter was picked up in a small gray pickup, and the driver was a younger male, approximately 18 years old, dressed up in some sort of uniform or suit. Gayla reached out to the media. She began making missing persons posters, and she was working with the Child Search Ministries as well. She stated that her 12-year-old had red hair, blue eyes, 110 pounds, and may be in the company of a non-custodial stepfather using the name Piette. For the next year, they searched endlessly for her to no avail. Meanwhile, Rosalynn could not attend school. 6th grade was the last grade she would ever attend. She was moved around the country, given false names, one being Stephanie Reed. She was forced to change her identity, and all of the children were constantly informed by Henri on what to tell anybody who asked questions about their family. Rosalynn was physically and sexually abused 3 times a day. She was forced to write these letters stating she had run away, and if she misspelled a word, she was hit. Before Rosalynn even turned 13, while they were living in Oklahoma City, she would become pregnant. She would suffer a miscarriage, and Henri forced her to flush it down the toilet without even telling her what had happened. She had no idea what any of that meant. After that, Henri force-fed Rosalynn cocaine and constantly beat her. At 14, she became pregnant again when they lived in Idaho. Now, Henri had to move the family because he did not want the people who were supporting them from the Mormon church to know that Rosalynn was pregnant. So he moved them to Mexico to avoid questions. Rosalynn explained that while in Mexico, Henri had once taken her to the hospital to deliver the baby. However, it was too soon, and the doctors refused. But Henri then just took her to a van, used a pocket knife, and delivered the baby on his own. Rosalynn's first birth experience was just as horrific as the manner in which she was impregnated. Then they took the baby home, which was really just an abandoned trailer that they were squatting in, where they had no electricity, no water, and it was infested with bed bugs. Rosalynn was trapped with her kidnapper and forced to have this child as a teenager, barely a teenager. Henri frequently moved them all around Mexico and Guatemala. They didn't spend more than a few months in one location so that no one would be able to ask questions about this very young mother and bride. As the years went on, the conditions the family lived in never got any better. Rosalynn continued to be essayed, and she would get pregnant with 8 more children. Rosalynn had been taken out of school in the 6th grade, and now the children were not allowed to go to school or learn to read, and they were completely isolated from everyone, as well as neglected. One of the girls almost drowned in a bucket of water, and Henri simply hung her upside down until she came to. They were constantly begging for money, moving wherever Henri wanted to go. He never worked, and while Rosalynn would often sell food or fight the locals for money, it was all going to Henri and his drug and alcohol addiction. Anytime she left the house, she was instructed to keep conversations short and check in hourly. Meanwhile, Rosalynn and the kids had no money for clothing, and one of the boys actually had to have a rope to tie to keep his shorts on. She became unaffected by Henri's, but 19 years and 9 kids later, Rosalynn was finally free. She had survived this monster for nearly 2 decades, and by 2017, she told her story, which was first published in People magazine in September.
All I know is that I was going to get away. I was going to go back to the United States, so my kids at least would be safe. To describe when you've been through so much trauma in your life, especially when the man who did this to you is not caught, you're always looking over your shoulder, thinking that he's gonna show up. I've been waiting my whole life for somebody to find me.
The very next month, Henri Piette was in custody in Mexico while trying to re-enter the United States. Authorities returned him to the United States to face his crimes, and DSS special agents were at the airport at his arrival and immediately placed him in custody. Henri was indicted by a federal grand jury for kidnapping and traveling with the intent to engage in SA with a juvenile. The prosecution also sought to admit evidence in the upcoming trial that Henri had essayed his own daughters with Rosalynn, as well as an unrelated girl in Missouri years prior to Rosalynn. The jury would be told that they should consider the evidence not just for motive and plan, but also for intent and knowledge. It was also stated that this kidnapping had continued uninterrupted from 1997 to 2016 because any break between that time period would have started the 5-year statute of limitations countdown. But Henri was arguing that it was not continuous. The prosecution stated that he had to prove that. The government then stated on the verdict form, if you have found the defendant guilty, you will be asked to determine if Rosalynn was no longer held against her will at an earlier date and what that date was. This will aid the court in making a separate legal determination. But Henri then sought to represent himself, stating that he and his lawyer had disagreements. He was given new counsel. Rosalynn then gave an interview to 41 Action News in 2018, stating that she never saw Henri as a stepfather, but someone who preyed on her family, that he knew who to target, how to get what he wanted. He was a child predator who moved into her neighborhood and targeted her family. She said she had been a normal kid. She felt safe with her family until Henri. She stated that her life stopped the moment that she was essayed.
The kind of trauma that I've been through, it's like life stopped the moment that you're abused, and you can remember every detail. It's hard to explain to someone that hasn't been through that, but it's just like imprinted. My mom knew about the abuse.
Did she know the extent of it?
Yes, she did.
So she knew he was having sex with you?
Yes. The next thing I know is that my mother's not there, my brothers are not there, none of my family's there, and I'm by myself with this man. I have about 21 scars on top of my head, and I'm not talking like little ones. I'm talking about ones like that from being beat over the head, hit over the head with glass beer bottles, 2x4s, cast iron skillets. Like, it's a miracle that I'm sitting here today. The longest I say we lived in a place was maybe 3 months. All those years of being in Mexico, I'm like, if I could just, if I ever do get away and if I could just get to the embassy or the consulate, I would be safe, They're gonna get me back home. Slowly, I'm replacing all those bad memories from such a young age with good memories.
The rest of their lives.
63-year-old Henri Michel Piette would go to trial in 2019.
Mr. Piette, do you have anything to say about the allegations against you?
Most of her lies. 99% are lies. I'm telling the truth.
But Rosalynn would testify at the trial that there was never a time that Henri was not beating her. She was sometimes tied to a bed or chained to a pole for days. She did not have the opportunity to be a mother to her children. She had scars all over her body. She had been stabbed. Both of her arms had been broken at one point. She suffered chronic pain and needed surgery after the escape in order to properly speak. She was once hit with a frying pan and it cut her all the way to the bone, and the children had not been treated any better. Henri would hit them with 2x4s, bats, rocks, pans, pickaxes, glass bottles, anything that was within reach. He would beat them unconscious and then tell them that he loved them. Rosalynn did state that she would sometimes travel back to the U.S. by herself to beg for money, especially when Henri would be in jail. She also purchased a gun and she carried it at all times. However, she said that it was Henri's gun. And this did not mean that Rosalynn was a willing participant in any of this. She was still a captive among what Henri called family. Henri often told her that he would kill the children and her if she ever tried to leave him. That if she went to the police, no one would believe her, and so he would then kill her. He said her own family did not want her back, and he was the only one that would ever care for her. Henri stated that she was to do exactly what he told her to do or else, and the else was that he would kill her children. She said she didn't try to harm Henri because she knew if she didn't kill him with the first shot or the stab, if he survived, he would kill everyone. While being in Mexico, she feared that if she did kill Henri, she would be in prison for life, and then the kids would be sold into slavery. While fearing for her life and now the lives of 9 children, Rosalynn tried to escape several times throughout the years. Once, Henri had left them alone in an Arizona motel room and she called a women's crisis shelter. However, Henri returned before she could get help. When Rosalynn was 18, Henri had actually made her go to the Arizona Police Department and tell officers she wanted to be removed from the missing persons database because she had run away. He held 3 children captive and watched outside of the police department. Once she had taken all of her children to one of Henri's son's homes. He was a boy named Mikey, but Henri arrived not long after, dragging Rosalynn outside by her hair and beat her. This, however, was when one of the 9 children had gotten to escape. He actually had a knife fight with Henri before fleeing from the family. With 8 of her children growing older and one who had already decided enough was enough with the abuse and escaped, Rosalynn knew that she needed to run. By 2016, she had saved up $150, hiding it outside so Henri could not find it. And then she met a couple, Lisa and Ian, in a supermarket. They could not pay for groceries, and this couple paid for Rosalynn to be able to get her groceries that day. She was grateful. The kids were talking to the couple. They were all barefoot. They were eager for interaction, and Rosalynn became friends with them. They often visited Rosalynn's home, and they eventually told her that they knew something was wrong and they wanted to help. Rosalynn had given up escape until that moment. She was shocked. She began trembling because they were the first to ever say anything to her.
Henri had been drinking like always, and she bought a birthday cake, and he had walked in the other room, and she's like, I know there's something wrong. If you can ever get away, I will help you.
She finally turned to me and she goes, look, I have to tell you something. Stephanie isn't my real name, and Bill isn't his real name. I said, who are you? And she said, well, he was my stepfather. His name is Henri Piette. My real name is Rosalynn McGinnis. And there she was, looking almost identical to where she was, but when she was 12. And there's this little, looked like one of her children on this poster. And there she was. She turned to me and she goes, I've been waiting 20 years for somebody to do the math and figure out that a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old shouldn't have babies like this.
We knew we needed to do something to help them, but the question was how, what, why, and when.
Then she waited until a moment that Henri passed out drunk. She took all 8 of her kids and went out searching for a taxi.
So you can imagine 8 children huddled in the back of an open fruit truck going through, starting at midnight, to Oaxaca, which is a 9-hour journey.
Ian and Lisa were taking care of the children at this time, and Rosalynn, who was forced to go by Stephanie, told them her real name. She feared that Henri would come looking for her, so she ended up contacting the American consulate in order to get help. When she arrived there, though, the consulate told her that there was nothing more they could do. So Lisa then called the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, who planned the journey to the Mexico border to get their travel documents, and then they were flown to Missouri. Rosalynn said that they were all scared to be on a plane. They had never been before, but they were very excited. The family of victims and survivors were free. They had escaped with the help of a couple in Mexico and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
We're not sorry. We're proud of what we did. In all our lives, we've had, several careers and done a lot of things and traveled. But we decided this is the single most important thing we've ever done.
I just hope that they manage to live a life without the fear that they've been living with, and I hope that they enjoy the rest of their lives.
She was hailed a hero for her bravery.
Without my children, I know that I wouldn't have survived, because they give me such a strong will to want to be there for them and to protect them.
Rosalynn's one of our heroes. I mean, when she escaped that captivity in Mexico, she wasn't only concerned for herself, she was concerned for her children. We were very proud to at least be part of helping her get back to safety.
It's never too late to say something to somebody, and no matter what's happened to you, that there's always hope.
And Rosalynn's cousin stated that she was in disbelief that her missing cousin had been found with 8 children. They were terrified because Henri was still a wanted man, and they feared that he would come back for all of them. You see, the children had not been spared simply because they were biologically related to this monster. Rosalynn's firstborn, who was only named Ma P, testified that when they started, when father made them dance naked, giving them alcohol and drugs. This was before they were even 7 years old. If she resisted, Henri told them that he would do the same thing to one of her younger sisters. The victim testified that they had to step in when Henri was trying to essay their younger sister, AP, who started crying. This younger sister, AP, would testify that Henri started abusing her when she was 7, and it continued every day. She'd also witnessed her younger brother being essayed as well, but the children never talked about it to one another until now. Lisa and Ian, the couple who helped them escape, testified as well and stated that they noticed how isolated the kids were and that something wasn't right about the situation. At the home, the children's bedrooms were basically 3 stalls in a line on a cement floor with thin foam exercise mats as beds. There were holes in the wall for doors and windows, and 8 children were living in what looked like the size of a walk-in closet. All the kids were skinny. They would talk about their father not loving them, and every time they visited the family, they knew they needed help. When they learned that Henri was 62 and Rosalynn was 32 and had a 17-year-old son, they told Rosalynn they would help her. When she showed up with the kids alone, they knew exactly what she meant. And so they began to feed the starving kids any food they wanted. They were doing tons of oatmeal, cereal, peanut butter, and jelly. The couple spoke about how upsetting it was that it took 20 years for someone to help. So many people turned a blind eye. She said that Rosalynn was having nightmares every single night that Henri was standing over her. Henri's father actually testified that he was in contact with his son and his wife throughout the years and just believed they were one big happy family. One of Henri's sons, Tobias, testified that Rosalynn was not the only victim when they lived in Springfield, Missouri, especially. He had seen his father essay several other young children. He once found him with an 8-year-old girl in the shower, and he also saw him giving another younger girl a driving lesson while she sat on his lap. Henri then spoke to the court for the duration of 30 transcripted pages. He maintained his innocence. He stated that he had a great work ethic and that his bosses called him the human backhoe, and they bragged about how popular his family dairy products were in Mexico. But on June 6th of 2019, Henri was found guilty by a federal jury, and on February 20th of 2020, he was sentenced to life for the kidnapping and 360 months for traveling with intent to engage in SA with a juvenile. He was also to give restitution to the victim in the amount of $50,000. The jury stated that they did not believe that there was a break in that kidnapping. And Rosalynn told 41 Action News that she was just happy that he was put away and he couldn't hurt anyone anymore. Now, Henri appealed, stating that both of his convictions should be reversed because the court improperly admitted the evidence about the other SA that he had committed. He was denied this, stating that it wasn't an abuse of discretion to admit the evidence and that his daughter's essay was admissible and the Springfield girl's essay was likely having no effect on the verdict. The government stated that Henri was producing children who he could control to meet his sexual desires, and that kidnapping Rosalynn was in preparation for this plan to create his own home where he could meet his perverse sexual needs without drawing attention. After the trial, Rosalynn began focusing on her children. Her oldest son lived out of the state, but her 8 children still lived with her, ranging from 4 to 19 years old. They attended school, but they were struggling to catch up with their peers, and they were struggling emotionally from the trauma. Rosalynn was working really hard to buy a home for her children near the schools that they attended because she wanted to give them the life she never had. The community businesses actually worked together to fix up this home for her. They were doing updated plumbing and electric, as well as the furnace and the air conditioning, as well as designing the place and giving them furniture. Rosalynn was so thankful, and she was just thankful to be alive.
The McGinnis family is now living in a home in Kansas City that was fixed up for them by volunteers and businesses within the KC community. They're also receiving support from the Jace Foundation, founded by J.C. Dugard, who was kidnapped at age 11 from a bus stop in California. The family is doing well and moving forward with their lives.
Rosalynn had given a victim impact statement, and I feel it's very important to hear it. She began, "It's hard to explain in such a short few pages that 22 years of damage this monster Henri Piette has done to me. Not one moment of any day goes by when I don't remember the torment and hell a such man has put me through. How much I wish that I could just erase the 22 years of my life from the age of 10 until the age of 22, until I finally escaped that life in captivity. The constant daily beatings, drugs, constant sexual acts I had to perform on a daily basis just to be able to survive another moment of a such called life with the sadist. Having to watch my kids live in constant fear of poverty. I grew up in a different country where I was secluded emotionally and socially away from people, which had made a big impact in living and adjusting to life here in the United States. Now that I'm living on my own, making my own decisions like what clothes I like to wear, underwear, bras, if I like to put on makeup, if I like to cut my hair, which food I like to eat, things I couldn't do until I escaped 8 years ago. Those whole 22 years of my life with Piette was dictated to me of every breath and movement I was allowed to make. Emotionally, I wasn't able to grow up, not able to have prenatal checkups to know that my children would be all right when each one of them were born. My children and young adulthood were taken away from me, and no one or anything can give that back. I know I now suffer from severe CPTSD, day and night flashbacks from the prior trauma. I suffer from depression, insomnia, anxiety, etc. The extreme trauma that I went through does never go away. It's something that I have started to learn to live with. I started learning how to live a normal life at the age of 32, also with the challenge to support my 9 children who all have special needs. It has not been easy. It is still very hard and a daily challenge. Having these 9 children look up to me for advice and guidance while I'm still figuring things out myself and trying to help them see the light at the end of that very dark tunnel. Spending an eternity in prison will not give me back those years that monster took from me. I was not able to grow up with my brothers, sisters, mother, father, grandma who passed away while I was missing, aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, schooling, prom, first boyfriend, first kiss, college, having children with the man that I would fall in love with as I could no longer have children. The one thing that it will do is keep him from harming any more children as long as he lives." This is such a powerful and impactful statement from Rosalynn. She knew that escape was for them, but it was also for her. But I hope that they get to live a life now that is soft, that is peaceful, where they don't have to be strong. I personally suffer from CPTSD as well. If you don't know the difference, it is diagnosed that way because it's not a singular event that caused the trauma. It is an everyday, daily basis, constant over a period of time that has not ceased, where your body has continued to be in that elevated, stressed state, traumatized state, and it can have lots of effects on your actual physical body, not to mention your mental health, constant weight, and almost a 24/7 hypervigilance, because that's what's needed in order to survive. It's not just one event that continues to come up in your memories, it is all of your memories over this period of time or a lifetime, and that takes a bit longer to heal from. So I hope that Rosalynn and her children don't give up on that healing. It can take some time, but it is so worth it, because that man, that monster, does not get to reign control over them anymore. And that's what healing is. It's a release of that power from the monsters. So thank you so much for listening to Rosalynn McGinnis' story. I will leave a playlist of other survivor stories down below if you need to hear some more. I feel like at this time in the world, we all just need some happy endings and some good news. So I was happy to bring this to you today. Thank you for listening genuinely. And don't forget to download Pop Slots down below for 10 million free chips. But don't forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.